Yeah, my name is
My name is Wayne
Jose
Eugene Penny.
Jimenez. My name is Jose Jimenez.
It's recording now, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen. I've just recorded his name.
I was born in Claremore, Oklahoma, United States of America. Will Rogers and I went to different schools together. My parents moved to Liberal, Kansas when I was a year old. My father had the first dry cleaning shop in Liberal. At that time, consisted of two barrels. One cleaning solvent, the other was a cleaner cleaning solvent. And then he hung them up on the line out in the sunshine for the cleaning solvent to evaporate. His irons that he pressed the clothes with were heated by charcoal. I put charcoal inside the iron. When the charcoal burned out, go ahead, pour the ashes out, and put new charcoal in it. In order to clean up the dry cleaning solvent, they pour some water and some lye into it. The lye would eat up all the dirt and stuff that was in it. Then they would siphon the clean solvent off of the water and the lye. Wash more, clean water off of it. They had a little dry cleaning shop about the size of your room in here. And did all the cleaning out in the open air. Then we moved to 15 West 2nd Street, shop there, and it was a much bigger shop. Had a big boiler, had a regular dry cleaning room, had the presses and the steam all on the inside. Ended up in when I came back from the service, World War II, Dad sold me the shop, and I ran the shop. Dad started his loan business.
A loan business?
He made loans, personal loans on all kinds of stuff to everybody. He borrowed the money from the bank for 4% and loaned it out at 18%.
Oh my goodness.
But he took a bigger risk than the bank would take.
Oh yeah. Banks wouldn't loan him that. In other words, if a guy would come in, we'll say the 20th of the month, and said, "Harry Penny, I need $100 till payday." He'd loan him the $100, charge him $10 for loan him the 100. That was for 10 days. And when he got the paycheck, the guy'd bring him his $100, $110. And, anyway, Dad had the loan business up in the second story. He had to climb the stairs to go to his office. He had the heart attack, and the doctor finally told him, "You're just not going to be walking those stairs. You're either going to bring your office down to a first level, or forget it. You don't go to work until at least 10 o'clock in the morning, then you quit at least 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you take a 2-hour lunch." That was his working hours then. And of course, he married Opal.
Opal?
Well, first, while I was overseas in World War II, he married an old school teacher that taught Gordon and I and Jack all three. Because the school teacher's mother had a boarding house. So Dad would go over there to eat meals, and then he would go home to live in his house. She had never been married before. She was an old maid school teacher. Of course, she wouldn't leave Liberals. He wanted to go take her around the world or whatever, but she wouldn't go. She couldn't leave Liberal. She was just so dedicated to the school and so forth that she had to make book reports and book reviews and such as that in the schools, and she'd never go with them. And finally, they had marital troubles, and she'd come to me and Daddy'd come to me, and the only thing I could say is, that's like two damn fools met. And so they divorced. She went back to live with Mom in the boarding house.
How long were they married?
A couple of years ago. I don't remember now.
Well, tell us about your mom.
My mother, Caroline Utter. Of course, Gordon being the oldest son, and I was the middle one. Jack was the youngest. 3 years apart between us. 3 years between Gordon and I, and 3 years between Jack and I. We lived on Clay Street in Liberal, Kansas. We had a whole big old vacant lot for almost 3/4 of a block. We did all the cowboy and Indian and Doug Cave, you name it. We lived there even through the dirty 30s and all the Dust Bowl days. And, they would be as perfect as this one, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes a big roll of dust. And it would be just as dark at 4 o'clock as it was in this house at midnight. From just the dust in the air. You couldn't clean clothes in the dry cleaning shop. When those come, they just had to cover up everything because keep the dust all over. Mom helped us at the cleaning shop doing sewing, alterations and such as that. Dad did a lot of that, and Mom would go help him when he got behind. But that wasn't maybe one day a week or something like that. But she went to the doctor, said that she thought she felt a lump in her breast, and he examined her and said, no, you don't. A year later, they removed her breast, and she was just cancer all through her whole chest. She passed away in the hospital in Sterling, Kansas.
What was her complete name?
Amanda Caroline Utter was her maiden name.
What year was she born, Dad?
That I can't even tell you.
You were born in 21.
Yeah.
About how old was she when
She
you
was
were born?
about 25.
When you were born or when Gordon was born?
Well, when I was born.
Okay, so maybe she was born in 1897,
Yeah, something like that.
1896.
95, 96, 97, somewhere.
Yeah.
You'd have been 100 years old
Tell
Yeah.
us
last year.
one of the fond stories of your mom that you remember.
Because Dad was always too busy or at the shop. He would go to work in the morning before I got up, but he would come home after I went to bed in the evening. So I didn't see my dad but very few times during the week. And of course, when a young boy, I wanted to go hunting, I wanted to go fishing. Gordon didn't like hunting or fishing. Jack didn't have the inclination yet. So my mother let me buy a single-shot .22 rifle, and she took me hunting for rabbits. She and I would go out and hunt rabbits in her old touring car. There was no windows, it was all open. It was ragtop car. And we'd see a rabbit out there, well, she'd stop and let me shoot at the rabbit or hit the rabbit or whatever. And boy, that was a big game hunt.
Did you eat the rabbit?
No, we didn't bring it in. The thrill of the kill, Jackrabbits were as big as that dog you had in Houston almost. Big old long ears. The cottontails were good eating, but they lived under cover.
Well, the farmers were delighted that you'd go out and shoot jackrabbits, weren't they?
Lord, yes, 'cause jackrabbits got so thick. But then Mom would take me out to a little slough on the Cimarron River and take me fishing. I remember taking you and Jean out there at that same slough and picked you with a little old willow thing with a piece of string and a hook on it. You guys were doing this,
Yeah.
slapping the water and all that. I kept telling you, well, you gotta hold the rod still or you won't catch a fish. Of course, you had to show me to be liars because here you can bring up a bass. You get a moving target. Good old bass about that long, But Mom and I went hunting one day and come back home. Gordon was into radio, building his own set. I know I came home with my single shot 22 and my box of bullets. My older brother Gordon picked up the gun and stuck a bullet in, and he didn't know what the heck it was. Anyway, he shot a hole right in the front of a big brand new radio that we had. Of course, you know what Mom did to my older brother about picking up my gun and oh boy. But anyway, we went grade school was about a block and a half away, and high school was about a mile and a half away. We'd walk to school in the morning, we'd walk home for lunch, go back to school in the afternoon, then walk home in the evening. And, we got a pretty good workout, about a 5-mile walk every day.
So when you graduated from high school, what did you do?
Went to work in the drive-train shop.
With your dad?
Yeah.
And Gordon, what did he do?
Well, Gordon and Louise slipped off and went to Diamond, Oklahoma and got married without anybody knowing. And Gordon was getting ready to go to college. And Dad and Mom found out that he was married.
Oops.
So they said, well, a married man don't go off to college. He goes to work to make a living for his wife, So Dad had another dry cleaning shop in Garden City, Kansas.
So how many did he have at this point?
Just the two shops.
Just the two, one in Garden City and one in Midland.
So he sent Gordon up there and says, you can go up there and run it, I'll give it to you. You're gonna have to make your living in that shop. Because they were having trouble with managers up there. And then Gordon got with some buddies up there and they decided that he liked hunting and fishing. Well, he made me look like a boob. He had many guns, lots of fishing tackle, went fishing and went hunting all the time. I couldn't afford to do that. And he got to drinking. Finally, he got to the point where he was going to bed with a bottle bottle beside his bed, he had to get up to that bottle and make more. It got pretty bad, so I had to go up and run his business every once in a while. And, it was a chore. Finally one day, one Sunday, he decided that he wanted to quit drinking. About 15 minutes later, Louise and I had him in the hospital. And he stopped. He hadn't drank since.
So when you graduated from high school, what did you do?
I just went, during school, I worked in a shoe store and sold shoes. I worked in a drugstore and all, considered being a pharmacist. The guy that owned the drugstore said, "You want to be a druggist, okay? The best way to learn that is go back there in the pharmacy and pick up every bottle, wipe it off, wipe underneath it, taste it. Then you'll remember what it is, where it is, and so forth." And I got to thinking, pharmacists are either working or on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I didn't really want to be in that kind of business. So I told Dad that I wanted to learn more about the dry cleaning business. So I went to Silver Springs, Maryland, which was the University of Dry Cleaning Industry. Went up there, and Silver Springs is just outside of Washington, D.C. And I went up there and got an education in the dry cleaning field. They taught us how to fix, clean, and repair fur coats, all about the different kinds of furs, about dyeing, how to, all about dyeing of clothing, about the cleans of leathers and all kinds of. The institute there at Silver Springs took in dry cleaning from customers, and then we worked on customers' clothes. We didn't have guinea pigs.
You did the real thing.
We did the real thing. We might have a white wedding gown that had a train from here to the wall, and you had to do the whole thing. You had to clean it, spot it, finish it, and everything. Same way with leather jackets, leather dresses, you name it.
How long were you there?
About 3 months. Then I came back.
And how old were you about this time?
19. Come back and and I hadn't hardly gotten back and gotten working real good, and then they began to talk about the draft, the Army, and Dad knew the little boy that was on the draft board, and one day we found out about the guy. There was a guy about my age or a tiny bit older that worked over in the Warren Hotel as a desk clerk that heard about this CPT flight training.
CPT, what's that for?
Civilian pilot training. It was made by the government, the Air Force, but in other words, it was under a contract, civilian contract, that they taught the kids how to fly. So in other words, we didn't have uniforms yet, but we went up there to Hays, Kansas, and they put us up in like a schoolhouse. We had cots in there, and that's where we lived. And they had a kitchen to feed us, and they would give us ground school for a half a day, and then we'd go out to the airport and fly for half a day. Instructors was teaching us to fly. And
So did you sign up for this voluntarily?
yeah,
Or? Did you decide
Because
you
it-
wanted to do this?
because I didn't wanna be drafted. I didn't wanna be an infantry soldier
Okay.
in the army. So I volunteered for that, and then we went into the Air Force at the end of that training there. In other words, they taught you up to your solo, where you could take the plane up by yourself, and then they taught you acrobatics and such as that. Then the military, we were to go to the Air Force, and one day we had a guy come in and said, well, they called all of us together and said, the Army is going to start a new thing in the Army. Army's gonna have their own airplanes. You're gonna be what they call a forward air observer from the air, and you would direct artillery fire from the air. We wanna know if any of you wanna volunteer to go to that program instead of going on to the Air Force. So there was about 30 of us that said, let's try it, it's brand new. We could get in on the ground floor.
You were how old at this time?
So they shipped us to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. They taught us how to break every safety rule in flying that there was. Because we would not be using airports. We had to be using roads or little short fields or such as that. And we flew Aeronicas, T-Crafts, and Piper Cubs. Fastest speed in one of those airplanes was about 60, 65 miles an hour. And so, T-Crafts and Aeronicas were one of those that you just slightly get it installed and then they fall off and install. So we didn't particularly like T-Crafts or Aeronicas. The old Piper Cubs, before they were installed, they practically do everything but tap you on the shoulder, saying that I'm getting ready to install. Because it goes shuddering and everything else. You knew when it was up there. They showed us evasive maneuvers to get away if, enemy fighters would try to get us because we flew so slow.
So this was during World War II?
This was the beginning, yeah. I was shipped from Fort Sill to Camp Edwards, Massachusetts. I joined the 36th Division there.
The U.S. Army.
Yeah, in the Army. And of course, I was in the artillery part of the 36th Division. And the artillery had 4 different battalions, so there was 2 pilots for each battalion, and we all had all of our airplanes and everything together. I would be under the command of the 36th Division Air Command, commanded our airplanes, and when I went back to the battalion, I was under the command of my battalion commander. So, since we were so brand new, we had no flight clothing. The only thing we had was our khakis and our ODs, olive drab wools, And Camp Edwards, Massachusetts, where we were there in the winter time, and you put on all your olive drab clothes you got, and you put on your overcoat, and then you try to get in an airplane with a parachute on you, and we couldn't get parts for our airplanes and everything, so.
What year was this?
This would be early part of 42. So, anyway, I went to my old CO in the battalion and I said, according to Army regulations, it says in the book that we're allowed to draw supplies from the Air Force. Well, he says, why don't you then? I said, well, I don't. I said, we're going to give it time. Well, he said, take my command car and drive over to Wright-Patterson Field and see what you can do. Well, I was a staff sergeant at that time. So I went over there, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and went in and I said, hey, according to the Army regulations, I can draw supplies. Never heard of such a thing. Oh, we had to go round and round, and finally they agreed. And I came home with that command car completely full and tied on top and everything else. And
What did you bring?
all kinds of clothing and parts for the airplane, you name it. I came home and as a staff sergeant, I couldn't sign for any of that property. It had to be an officer to sign for it. So I said, well, the best thing I can do is I'll take this all home and I'll have my commanding officer sign for it. If you'll let me do it. So they trusted me and away I went. I went back to my old colonel and he said, what is that? Tell me, why didn't you bring the runways too? And anyway, he says, you got enough for the whole division of all the pilots and everything. I said, I know it. There wasn't any sense of me just going and getting it for me. And he said, well, I'm not going to sign for all of it. I'm going to have each battalion commander sign for their portion. So you divide it out as what it is. So we did that, and each battalion commander then signed the paper, and I took them back and turned them in. So we got that thing that we started. Well, then they shipped us overseas. We went to Staten Island and loaded up on. I rode the ship or the luxury liner that took trips around the world and so forth.
Queen Elizabeth?
No, it was called the USS Brazil.
Uh-huh.
It would take 80 passengers.
Wow.
So they loaded up 2,500 enlisted men and 1,500 officers on it.
On an 80-passenger ship.
And we took off for Africa. Well, we were in a convoy. And about 10 days out, we run out of fresh water. So when you go to the mess hall to eat, you go down there with your mess gear, and you got maybe 2 boiled eggs and a piece of toast for breakfast. And they had some sea rations that they heated up that you could get for lunch, and then some more sea rations for supper. And then you come back with your mess kit and you wash it because they had a horse tank there with water and soap. You wash your mess gear. Well, the only problem is when they run out of fresh water, they was using freshwater soap in salt water, and all it does is curdle. So everybody got the GIs.
Uh-oh.
And can you imagine 2,500 enlisted men on a boat that didn't have that many heads? There was a long line at every head. In the Navy, the head is the bathroom or the restroom.
Okay.
And so there were butts hanging over the rails and going in their helmets, their steel helmets, and then dumped overside, and you name it. Anyway, the ship got to stinking pretty bad. I think the convoy just moved out away from us. So. Anyway, we finally got to Africa, and we got unloaded.
I'd take a bath the first thing I'd get on.
We were unloaded north of. Well, I think we were unloaded at Port d'Orty, Africa, which is north of Casablanca.
Now, what country in Africa would that be today?
Well, that'd be the.
Casablanca in Morocco?
That's Spanish Morocco.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, We went on watching, there was German troops back in Africa, and we had to watch. We were put on patrol duty, flying back and forth along the border, a border, watching for German movements. And that was our part. Then the artillery. Then we moved on across Africa. In other words, then we got ready for the invasion of Italy. So they took our little airplanes. They took an LST, and that's a landing ship. Oh, what, 70 feet long? At the front folds down and, okay.
They've been
They
one
made
that was
it.
built by CBI.
They made a landing field on top of that. It was a runway that two-wheel tracks about that wide, and you had approximately 60 feet of runway.
60 feet is from here to the corner of the yard.
Yeah.
That's like,
So, in other words, they lifted our plane up with a crane and set it up there on top. And it was tied down until we got over there at the invasion, and of course the LST would have to head into the wind at full speed for us to take off. Then we would get our airplane revved up as high as RPM as we possibly could, and we just jump off of that thing. There was no coming back to it.
yeah,
You had to land on
And
land.
they had to land somewhere in Italy.
Somewhere in Italy is right. And we went in south of Naples. And, of course, we didn't go in on the initial assault. They went in like real early morning, and we didn't come in until the next morning. So they had a beachhead established, and we landed right on the beach, right down next to the water. You know, of course, the Germans would try to shoot our airplanes even while they were sitting on the ground with artillery and so forth. But we got through it all right. But, I had a real nice place to sleep at night
where?
because I can't carry the camouflage net. Cover up my airplane.
Yeah.
And when I got dark, I didn't need the camouflage net, so I slept on it. That was my place to sleep.
So in the morning you can wake up, take off the camouflage and then
Get off the camouflage net and put it up over the airplane. Of course, we had Piper Cubs. A lot of times, if we had a building like this, to make it look like the plane had crashed or something, we put a little block down and just tip the airplane up and set the propeller on the block and tip the airplane up against the building. And that's where it stayed. Yep. Nobody would look for an airplane that was tipped up against the side of the building.
how is it tipped up?
Well, we lifted it.
It was a small airplane then.
Yeah, it's all just
Like a prop?
covered with canvas. It wasn't a metal airplane. It was metal tubing and so forth, and it was covered over with canvas.
The skin of the airplane wasn't metal like you see today. It was just it was cloth like in your shorts.
Yeah.
And it
And
was
they
just stretched
painted
tight.
Painted with a dope over it that made a hard surface on the fabric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
Painted
long
to-
were you overseas?
4 years.
4 years overseas?
Yeah.
In
Because
Africa and
We were in
Italy?
Africa, then we went the invasion of Italy. We went up from south of Naples, we went up that, passed through Rome, on up to Cassino. And we were stymied at Cassino for almost a little over a year. Then they pulled our division, our stuff back, and give us 10 days rest, and then we went in over here in the invasion of southern France. And we worked our way up to southern France, over into Alsace-Lorraine, into Germany.
So in that 4 years, you never went home.
Oh, no.
And what did they pay you to be in the
Oh, I'm
service?
telling you that one. As well, let me put it this way. My pay as a staff sergeant was $96 a month. At flying pay, which was extra pay, I got maybe another $75.
Is that a lot?
No, not today.
Then I got a battlefield commission over in Italy. They tore off my stripes, put bars on my collar. I was a second lieutenant. So, you wore the same uniform, just took the stripes off and put bars on it. That was it. My old colonel gave me the bars and our artillery insignia on one side and the bar on the other side. And my pay went up to about $156 a month, plus flight pay of about $90. Of course, you had nothing to spend it on. They didn't. I sent most all of it home, and you had nothing to buy over there. There wasn't anything, no place to go to buy it.
Stores were basically closed while there was a war going on, huh?
You bet.
So how did you acquire those guns that you gave Ray?
At Kruppstahl?
When we were going through Alsace-Lorraine, which is a part of Germany, they speak a different language instead of, it's part Italian, part French, and part German. Okay. We got tired of living in tents. These were enemy people. People were the enemy, not the civilians. I mean, they'd still try to booby trap us and everything else, but we'd say, we'd go knock on the door. We like to use your house for about 3 days. Will you please move out? We won't harm your house. All we're gonna do is sleep on top of your beds, use your stove or something to cook and such as that, but other than that, we won't harm your house unless you try to harm us. And at times we were both booby trapped. They said explosions and everything else, And so the house, the grand piano would have the legs knocked off and the lid tore up and keys all messed up and stuff like that. The furniture got pretty badly used in a house like that. Other than that, we would use a house, leave it the way we got it, even leave it some food or something like that. But generally speaking, the people were fairly decent to us. A couple of times we almost destroyed the house because they tried to destroy us. We just, on the bed, we just throw our bedroll out on top of the bed, and that's, we didn't have to use our covers or anything like that. But it depended on where we could land. In other words, if we could find a little strip or field or something right out close to town, then we would use a house.
So the gun?
The guns, when we come to these houses like this, if there was guns, see, it was against the law for them to have guns in it.
Mm-hmm.
So we just took what we wanted.
You
And we would-
confiscated them.
We would leave money for them,
Mhm.
but we'd take them. A lot of them we just destroyed, because if we found the guns and they weren't worth a damn, well, we just bend the barrel or break the stock or such as that. So, but these were good guns that were powder marked for the good shells and American powder. So that's the ones we took. I took 2 guns, put them in, made a wooden box, and mailed those 2 guns in the wooden box to Dad, and wrote on the outside 2 German shotguns.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, they got home. Somehow or another, the postal employees were all honest.
Mhm.
And so Dad took them over to a hardware store, an old man Ames, and he cleaned them all up, and then I had them all Cosmoline. I had all the Cosmoline on them, which is a type of grease and asbestos that so the water wouldn't penetrate. I just took them all apart and covered them all with Cosmoline and put them in this box. And it was just like it was packed in grease, you know.
Mhm.
And Dad took them over to old man in the hardware store, and he cleaned them all up and put them back together and give them back to Dad. And Dad kept them until I got home. But the 1 gun wasn't near as good, and I forget now what the heck I did, but I kept the old crux at home. That was a good one.
You remember about where that came from? What town or what
No.
area it was?
It's out South Lorraine. But then when we got over there,
You don't remember the man's name you got it from?
no, because none of the people over there were allowed to have a gun, regardless of whether it was shotgun, pistol, rifle, or whatever.
Now that was the rules of the war? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you were supposed to confiscate.
Either that or destroy them. Yeah. You know, you found a lot of Lugers and everything else. Oh, you go to the Air Force. Air Force guys wanted to buy all the Lugers and such and that, the pistols. And you can clean up. Now you get $100 for a Luger, German Luger. I'd rather have $100 in my pocket than having a German Luger.
So, how did your overseas duty end?
Well, we got into Alsace-Lorraine, and we got notice that they were going to send some pilots that had experience back to the States to be instructors at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Anybody wishing to do that would put in for it, so I put in for it. And lo and behold, they said, I got it. So I went to Munich, Germany. Red Cross plane flew me from Munich to Paris. I stayed in Paris, I think 18 days waiting for transportation to get arranged. Then they shipped me over to London, and I had to wait 8 days there. We were hoping to get air transportation back to the States, but I got a Liberty ship. The Liberty ship, I had a little Coast Guard cutter lashed to the deck on one side, and a landing craft and stuff on the other side to balance it. And the crew of that little, it was like a PT boat, and the crew stayed right on that. And I forget now what the hole in the ship was carrying home back to the States. But anyway, we got started, and there were so many icebergs in the water between us and the States. And our route was supposed to go clear down to Africa and then across. Well, the old skipper told the crew on this little cutter, he said, if you'll man the radar 24 hours a day with your crew, we'll go straight across. So we did that, and we were in storms where I laid in bed with like this, in order to stay in the bed, in the bunk, you know. road like this, up and down, and you name it. And we finally got over outside of the States for about 2 days out, and they radioed Norfolk, Virginia, and said, sorry, we don't have any place for you to put in to. No, wait a minute, we were supposed to go to Staten Island. They radioed Norfolk, and Norfolk could let us in. So we landed at Norfolk, Virginia, and guess what they wanted Lieutenant Penny to do? They wanted me to be in charge of a troop train going somewhere.
Hello, what?
A troop train.
Carry
A train
troops on a
loaded
train.
with soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think I wanted to do that. That train was going to be awful slow. So I finagled. I went to sergeant in transportation, and I said, what in the world does it take to get on an airplane to Wichita, Kansas? Well, they said, you have to have transportation priority. I said, how do I get that? Well, it says it's a sheet just like this one right here, and made out, and if you can get A1 priority, then that's all you need. So what? I sit down on the typewriter and I got A1 priority.
You mean you filled it out yourself and
Heck
signed
yeah.
it?
Went in and transportation. I said, I have got to get home in a hurry. Here's my priority. They stuck me on that one. I went from Norfolk to New York to Chicago to Wichita, Kansas. And I got bumped in New York, and I bought a bouquet of flowers, and got put back on the plane. I got to Chicago, and it was a buck sergeant, and I bought him a box of cigars, and he put me back on. I was home in less than 24 hours.
So how is your homecoming?
Oh, Dad was waiting there. Oh, I was had gone with a girl before I left home, and had written to her all the way, and we were talking about getting married, and she was at the airport with Dad, and she came home to Liberal. She was living in Wichita. She was a nurse. She'd gone into nursing training while I was going to Europe. And came home and she said, well, if we get married, what are you going to do? Well, she'd been born and raised in Liberal. And I said, well, I guess it'd be to run a dry cleaning shop in Liberal. No way, I wouldn't live in Liberal for nothing. I said, here's your bus ticket and get back to Wichita then. Said, I gotta make a living. I said, for the amount of money that I got put away for while I've been gone, that wouldn't keep us very long, and starting something I didn't know or anything else. Well, no way. So she got back on the bus, and I haven't heard from her since. Well, I did too. One day, and I got a postcard from her. It was a postcard with a picture of her and her family. And she had an address on it, no telephone number or anything, because they'd had a class reunion, and everybody knew what my address was. And I tried calling her, couldn't find her at all. So I haven't talked to her since.
What was her name?
Dolores Mann. Frank Mann was her father, drove the ambulance or the hearse that took me to the hospital when I had polio in 1949.
Which was before or after the service?
Oh, 49. Well, it was after I.
That was after the war was over.
Yeah.
Yeah. The year
Before they
I was
called me back to the army to go to Korea
born. What year did you and Mom get married?
in 46.
How did you, okay, so you get back home.
You got back home to Liberal and you bought the
Oh,
Dolores
I-
bus ticket.
I got home to Liberal. I had 30 days leave before I had to report to Fort Sill. I went down to Fort Sill, and Fort Sill is where I met your mom.
Okay. And that 30 days is when you bought Dolores a bus ticket.
Yeah. Well, it didn't take but about 3 days that she was down there, and I put her on a bus and sent her back home.
Yeah.
Her folks, and she lived in Wichita then.
Yeah. So then you went down to Fort Sill, and how long were you there?
Well, I was supposed to go down there and be into the pilot training. I mean, get my course of what I was going to teach the students and so forth. And they had a point system come up in the Army. You've got points for being in each month that you were in the service. More points if you were overseas. Decorations or such as that got you more points. And they said, well, if you had 100 points, you could get out. Well, I have 136 points. So they said, well, you're not going to be an instructor, but wouldn't any more get you started and you'd be leaving for home? Well, I sat around there for 60 days waiting for them to discharge me and send me home.
So you got out of the service?
Yeah.
And in that 60 days, is that when you met Ray Roberts?
Oh, yeah, before that.
Ray. Ray Fisk.
Ray Fisk
Oh,
at
Ray,
that.
yeah,
Ray
that's
Randy
right, I'm
Fisk.
sorry.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
You mean?
Tell us how you met.
Oh, she was, when I got home, Dad and I went car shopping and I bought I forget that what year.
Now this is when you got back to Liberal,
Liberal.
and during that 30
Now,
days
he
leave.
took me down to Fort Sill, and Dad, I gotta have a car, and I got some money saved up. I've gotta have transportation, you know. Well, we went shopping, and I bought a DeSoto. Well, the tires weren't too good on it. Dad said, well, I'll give you, that tires were rationed, sugar was rationed, meat was rationed, and everything else. He gave me, since we had delivery trucks, well, they give him coupons for tires. So he let me have the coupons for truck tires. Of course, I couldn't put truck tires on my car. So I looked up and found this tire store, and your mother worked in that tire store. She was going with a major, Army major, and she didn't want to have much to do with me, but anyway, I went in there and sort of made friends with the guy that owned the tire store. And I give him that old story, you know, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Here's the coupons for 4 new truck tires. I just want passenger car tires for them. You can sell truck tires to somebody else. So we did that. And I got acquainted with your mother and that. Anyway, her boss and his wife and I was going to go to a football game. Invited your mother to go with us. And we went to this football game, and you talk about rain. I mean, it rained cat and dog. Everybody got wet. But we sat through the ball game anyhow. Now, that sort of broke the ice with your mother. And so I asked her out for another date or so forth. Said yes. And I guess her boyfriend, the major, was gonna be leaving or going somewhere, and she and him, I guess, split up. And I asked her for another date, and she said yes. Anyway, I met the Fisk and dated her, and then when I went on to Liberal, then I came back down and would stay over a weekend 300-mile drive down there, 300-mile back. Go down Friday night, come back Sunday evening. And when we got married, and
When did you get married?
Hmm?
When did you get married?
1946. And we knew there was this government housing out there. Liberal had an Army Air Force base. They trained pilots for B-24s. And of course, when I got there, the base had already closed, but the housing was out there. And so Dad and I finagled me an apartment out there in this housing complex.
Blue Bonnets, was that what it was?
Bluebonnet.
Blue Bonnet Estates, as I recall.
They were concrete block houses, apartments, you know. And I got a 2-bedroom apartment. I think I paid $90 a month for it. Joy. And old Carl Zimmer and Maggie lived right across the road from us.
That was after you got married?
Yeah, that's where we went when we got married. That was going to be our place to live.
In Liberal, and you were working where?
Right at the dry cleaning shop.
With your dad?
Yeah. Well, hey, I got in at 4:30 in the afternoon. Dad quit work at 5. He said, "You're it, Buster. You're 50% owner. I'll sell you the other 50 whenever you can make it." A year later, I bought the other 50%. Dad started his investment business. I run the dry cleaning shop.
Now, Jean was born in Lawton.
Yeah, well, your mother got pregnant and she wanted to be at home the last 60 days.
Okay. That's how he got born in Lawton.
Yeah.
Because Mom went back
She
to
had to
Lawton.
go home to Mama,
Yeah.
Mom and Daddy. And she called me and, well, one evening I left the dry cleaning shop about 6:30 and I went over to a little private club and had a drink and got me a bite to eat, and I didn't get home until probably 7:30. And Carl Zimmerman, who lived just across the little road from it, was waiting there. Says, "Hey, you got a telephone call." Said, "We've been looking all over town for you." At that time, you had telephone operators. Ray just called, couldn't get an answer, so she called, talked to the operator. Said, "Hey, I'm Wayne Penny's wife. I'm pregnant. I'm going to the hospital now." And the operator that she talked to had known me ever since I was that high, you know. And, so they were calling all the haunts. They'd call Carl Zimmerman, they'd call Rex Newbar, they called everybody that I knew, you know, trying to find me. And when I got home, there it was. So I called, said, "Well, she's already gone to the hospital." So I got in the car, took off, and this was glare ice,
It was in February.
practically all the way. And I was driving 80 miles an hour on glare ice. Oh man. Well, I made it in 5 hours.
So was Gina already born then when you got there?
No, I got there in time.
And then she came back home?
Yeah, after a while, she stayed there and for a month or two. I'd drive down on the weekends. And, then she came home. Then we decided to build that house. I drew up the plans. I guess this is where Gene got his architectural
Training.
I drew up the plans for the house and went to a lumber yard and said, "What's this house gonna cost?" 3-bedroom house, lot and everything, it's gonna cost me $15,000. So I went to the bank, I said, well, I've got half of it. Will you loan me the other half? Sure. All right, you got the plans to lumberyard, and they got the contractor, and they started building. The only mistake that I made in the plans was that we had a basement, and the house sitting on top of the basement. One window to the basement was right in the middle of the back porch. So we had to close that window.
Close that. You got the window right under the door, huh?
No, right, yeah, but, and it was a slab basement, slab outdoor
Yeah.
Porch.
porch, you know.
Yeah.
About 6 foot square, you know. But that window was right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
We went out to the river in order to give you guys quick shade. We went out to the river and dug up cottonwood trees. We planted a cottonwood tree in that front yard. The time you were born, well, today it has a trunk on it as big as that tree there.
Is the
Our-
house still standing?
Hmm?
Is
Oh,
the house still
oh, yeah.
standing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember Buttons,
Yeah. Remember Buttons, the Cocker Spaniel?
Cocker Spaniel. When I married your mother, she had a cocker called Edwina.
How old was
little
Ray
red.
when you married her?
Well, she's what?
She's born in 24.
She's born in 24.
So if you were married in 46, she was 22.
And you were,
25.
so then what happened?
We had a dry cleaning shop.
Yeah.
And in 49, we drove to Colorado Springs, up in the mountains for a vacation over a weekend. And we drove back at night. The next morning I woke up and I had such a terrific headache. I went down to the dry cleaning shop and man, I took aspirin and couldn't get rid of it. Finally about 9:30, across the alley was a drugstore. And I knew the pharmacist and everybody else in that. Old Charlie Taylor owned the drugstore. And Charlie was an old crony of Dad's. And so I went over there, and it was they had a soda fountain there, and they served coffee in the morning. So I went up there, the pharmacist was busy, and so I went up to the soda fountain, and I said, I need a cup of coffee. So I grabbed a cup of coffee. There was a lady that she and her husband had the dry goods store on the corner. She was in there. She was having a cup of coffee, so I sat down with her, having a coffee. She said, you look like you've been drugged through a knothole. I said, well, I feel like bad too. I said, I've got such a terrific headache. I'm almost sick at my stomach. And I said I was going to wait and get the pharmacist to give me something stronger than the regular aspirin, see if I couldn't get rid of it. She said, don't drink that coffee. She opened her bag and pulled out a thermometer. She was a nurse. And she took my temperature and she said, now, I don't want to scare you. I think you got polio. And she said, aspirin's not going to do you any good anyhow. She said, tell you what you do. You go home and lay down and take a nap if you can. And she said, if you haven't lost this headache by the middle of the afternoon, you call your doctor. She said, now, you possibly better not tell your wife, because if I'm wrong, I don't want to scare the hell out of everybody, but if I'm right, then, so I went home and told your mother that I was gonna lay down and try to get rid of this headache. I thought it was just from driving back from Colorado. It was a long drive, 375 miles. And so, about 2 o'clock, I said, hey, would you call old Doc Campion? He just lives over here on the other side of us. He was in internist. And John Campion, on his way home, he stopped by here and seen me. Time I'm running a fever and I got a real bad headache. One person, Campion, come by. I was in there laying on the bed. He opened his little kit and he said, oh shoot. He said, I don't have any tongue depressor. I said, Ray, would you get me a spoon? I can use a handle for a tongue depressor. Yeah. He said, now, I'm going to tell your wife that I'm going to take you back to the office and get the pills that you need. And I'll bring you back home. Okay. So when she come back with a spoon, he looked down my throat and he said, oh, no. He said, damn, he said, I don't have any pills with me. But I got them at the office. So I'll just take him down and give him a shot and that'll get him over in a hurry. So I'll just take him down myself and bring him back. That was all right with your mother. So he took me right to the hospital and they gave me a spinal tap. And sure enough, I had it. So he called Dad and he said, you might want to go and talk to your daughter-in-law. And he said, your son's got, I'm sure he's got polio. He needs to get in the hospital. Dad said, well, call a meat wagon, call A.B. Kennel, get him on his way to Wichita. Because the Catholic hospital up there had an old maid Dane by the name of Rasmussen, Agnes Rasmussen, that had, and a nun that had studied under Sister Kenny. Sister Kenny, yeah, because she was polio. And I came in on Tuesday or Monday night, and they put me in the bed with wool sheets, no pillow, no aspirin, no nothing, but just cold ice water. You drink ice water, and if you urinated, they measured how much water you were drinking against how much you were urinating. And they always, you're not drinking enough water, drink more water. So, anyway, Rex Neubauer, the guy that we played canasta with, gin, you name it, he came in on Saturday with polio. So they put us both in the same room. Was in the hospital there in Wichita. And Rex didn't freeze up like I did. I got real stiff. And after I was there for several days, my temperature got up around 104. And I couldn't, they wouldn't let me get up on my elbows. I was to lay flat on the bed, wool sheets. Dad wanted to have an air conditioner put in the room, so he couldn't have an air conditioner. Said he's not bothered anyhow. He's too hot. He don't know whether it's cool or not. So. Anyway, after a few days, well, then they began to give me the old treatment to take me down to the kidney-shaped swimming pool. They'd load me on a stretcher, roll me off the bed on a stretcher, on a meat wagon, take me down to a tank, and they'd lift up the stretcher with a crane, lower me down in this tank, just water was clear up to here. And they'd turn on those blowers and they'd just wave my muscles and arms and legs, you know. And the water was 105 degrees.
Oh.
Now, you know, when they first went in it, you figured you were already parboiled. You turned red like a lobster. But anyway, by the time you stayed in there for a while, the water felt cool. But then they would lift you back up, roll you off of that stretcher into a wool blanket, roll you up in that wool blanket, and you stayed in that wool blanket until you cooled down.
Oh. Well, how long? Well, we need to be we need to be thinking about getting towards the airport. But
And I'm gonna
finish
take a shower.
well, but
Oh, wait, but you
Finish
have to
your story.
finish the story. So, how did you get polio and?
I don't have the slightest idea.
how long were you in the hospital?
How did you recuperate?
3 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks or so. I got a small curvature of the spine from it.
Uh-huh.
I was told not to work for a year, I said, "Bleh, you know better than that." No, in a week I was back to work.
What did they give you?
There's no medicine that you can take for polio.
They didn't have the salt vaccine back then, huh?
Well, that's just to keep
Avoiding
you
it.
from getting it.
Yeah. Once you got it, there was nothing to
Yeah.
do, huh?
There was a girl in Hugoton had it. Hugoton was 36 miles away. So they closed all the swimming pools. Hell, I hadn't been in a swimming pool. Rex hadn't been in a swimming pool. But they closed the swimming pools. Big polio
Epidemic, huh? There were two of you.
Yeah,
3 of you.
yeah. So
Wow.
anyway, when they called me back to the service,
What year was that?
in 51, I told them that I had polio. Well, they spent about 4 hours going over my back and my muscular control and depth of perception and everything. Said, "Hey, you're all right. You can go fly again."
So you went to Korea and
So,
spent 3 years there, huh?
2 years.
2 years.
Well, that's a nice long story.
That was
Yeah.
after the kids were born.
Well, okay.
Well, we'll continue this on a different day.
Yeah.
I'll go take a shower, get my traveling clothes on, and
You ready to go back to LA?
Today is what day?
I've already got the date in there, dear.
Raymond, come sit next to your grandpa and get down, get a little picture with him at this stage.
oh, you even gonna take your hat off and show them your alley, huh?
Right here,
Where's Daniel?
Hey, Daniel.
my house on there. Don't tell him he's watching cartoons.
Okay.
Yeah, February 1st, 1998. There we are. All right. Well, Grandpa, we sure enjoyed having you here in Buenos Aires, Argentina with us for the last week. 2 weeks, actually, that you've been here. And sorry to see you go home.
Yeah, you and me both.
But we'll come visit you next time.
Good.
How's that be?
All right.
All right?
All right.
I'll send Raymond to you then. So you can whip him into shape.
All right.
Call Daniel, Ray.
Hey, Daniel! He's probably watching a movie. We better get going here, Grandpa. We're going to get you to the airport.
Me too.
We'll follow you.